She had found her husband's dead first wife's journals, which described him as a serial cheater who had isolated her to the point of suicide. Later, she discovered that he had been meticulously recreating their exact photos and trips with her, in the same locations, wearing the same outfits. This wasn't a love story. It was the story of how she realized she was sharing a bed with a monster. It was a story that would make anyone question how well they truly know their partner. A story about how a picture-perfect marriage could hide a truth so rotten and horrifying. Her name was Dina, and she was 33. She had been married to Marcus for a year. Their meeting had been a whirlwind. He was charming, intelligent, and had a sadness in his eyes that made her want to protect him. He had told her about his first wife, Aaliyah, his high school sweetheart who had passed away 3 years prior. He explained that she had taken her own life after a long battle with her mental health. He rarely spoke of her, and Dina never pushed, believing she was respecting his past. Their life was perfect, almost too perfect. He was the kind of husband most people only dreamed of. But a tiny crack in that perfect picture was about to shatter her entire world. It all started with a feeling that something was deeply, deeply wrong. It began with an earring, a single silver earring, shaped like a teardrop, that she knew for a fact wasn't hers. She found it wedged in the passenger seat of Marcus's car. When she showed it to him, he didn't even flinch. His explanation was smooth. It belonged to a co-worker, Kate, who must have dropped it the previous week when he drove the team to lunch. It was a completely reasonable explanation. A part of Dina's brain accepted it and moved on. But another part, a deeper, quieter part, screamed that he was a liar. That feeling, once it took root, never went away. It was like a low-frequency hum that only she could hear. She began noticing little things. The way Marcus kept his phone face down on the table, the late-night work calls he had to take out on the balcony. She told herself she was being paranoid, that she was sabotaging her own happiness, but she couldn't shake the feeling. Her attention then turned to the attic. The house had an attic, but she'd never been up there. Marcus had said it was just filled with his family's old junk, dusty and cluttered, with no point in cleaning it out. Every time she suggested clearing it for extra storage, he would brush it off, telling her they'd do it later. But now, that attic felt like a Pandora's box in her own home, a forbidden zone, and that only made her more determined. The perfect opportunity came when Marcus had to go to his mom's house in another town for a full week. She was sick. The moment he drove away, a mix of guilt and resolve washed over Dina. That night, she stood under the attic door, her heart hammering against her ribs. She had bought a small lock-picking set online. It felt ridiculous, but she had to know. The lock was old and rusty. It only took a few minutes of fumbling before it clicked open. She held her breath, pushed the door up, and climbed. The air was thick with dust and memories. Amidst the boxes and old furniture draped in white sheets, she saw it. A wooden chest, old-fashioned, secured with another sturdier lock. This time, she used a small crowbar. The sound of the wood splintering made her flinch. As the lid popped open, the first thing that hit her was a smell of old paper and a faint, haunting perfume. Inside, stacked neatly, was a pile of leather-bound journals and a few photo albums. She picked up the first one, her hands shaking. The slanted, elegant script on the first page read, Aaliyah. She sat there, on the dusty attic floor, and began to read. At first, they were the words of a girl in love, writing about Marcus with adoration, about their dreams and plans. But slowly, the tone began to change. It became anxious, then fearful, and finally, desperate. She read about the times he disappeared and the blatant lies he told. Aaliyah had transcribed a conversation that Dina would never forget. She had written that she could smell another woman's perfume on his shirt. In response, he had looked her right in the eye and told her she was imagining things, that her insecurity was destroying them, and that she needed help. Aaliyah wrote that she had almost believed him, that she had hated herself for ever doubting him. That's when Dina felt sick to her stomach. This wasn't just cheating, it was cruel manipulation. Then, she opened the photo albums. They were pictures of a happy couple, but as she turned the pages, a cold dread washed over her. A photo of them at a small seaside cafe, smiling over coffee. Dina had the exact same picture, the same cafe, the same camera angle, the same table. Marcus had taken her there on their spontaneous getaway 3 months ago. Another picture showed Aliyah wearing a deep red scarf, standing by a rock overlooking the ocean. That scarf. Marcus had given Dina an identical one for her birthday, saying he saw it and it made him think of her. It was page after page of this. Dozens of photos. Dozens of Dina's special memories were just meticulous recreations of another life. She wasn't his wife. She was a ghost. She was a stand-in for a dead woman, cast in a play she didn't even know she was in. Their entire relationship was an elaborate, staged lie. She sat there in the darkness of the attic, surrounded by a dead woman's secrets, and felt her world completely unravel. And then, the most horrifying question snuck into her mind, cold and sharp as a shard of ice. If Marcus could recreate her life with her, had he also directed her death? The week Marcus was gone was the longest of her life. She was living in a torturous limbo, caught between the horrifying truth she'd discovered and the fake life she had to maintain. Every time he called, she had to swallow the lump in her throat and modulate her voice to sound normal and loving. She would lie that everything was fine, that she missed him. Each word felt like a knife. She felt like she was going insane in her own home, haunted by Aliyah's ghost and the lies of the man she had married. The day he came back, she was ready. She didn't cry or scream. A cold calm had settled over her. He walked in, smiled, and wrapped her in a hug that felt like a violation. That evening, after a tense dinner, she placed the journals and a few comparison photos on the coffee table. The look on his face was not one of shock or confusion. Instead, his face instantly darkened and his eyes went cold. His first reaction wasn't defense, but offense. He asked her what she had done, accusing her of going through his things and snooping where she didn't belong. She told him she had found and read them, then asked him if what Aliyah had written was true. He let out a short, bitter laugh, a vile sound. He asked if she was really going to believe the ramblings of a depressed woman, calling Aliyah unstable, negative, and paranoid. When Dina pushed back, asking about the photos and the recreated memories like the red scarf, he grew exasperated. He told her she was reading too much into things and creating problems out of nothing. He said this was the exact reason he and Aliyah had so many issues, calling her insecurity toxic. He had completely flipped the script, making it her fault. She had violated his trust and was now acting just like his dead wife. He didn't even bother to deny the cheating. He simply invalidated it as the product of a sick mind. Stunned by his audacity, Dina sat in silence. Realizing there were no answers for him, he announced he needed some air, grabbed his keys, and left. He didn't come back that night. The next morning, he walked in as if nothing had happened, showering and getting dressed for work. When Dina asked where he had been, he didn't even look at her. He casually claimed he had crashed at his friend Brian S.'s place because he didn't want to make a scene. The lie was so easy for him, so natural, and she knew with a gut-wrenching certainty that it wasn't true. She felt herself sinking, the trap of isolation and gaslighting that Aliyah had written about now closing in around her. She needed someone, anyone, to tell her she wasn't crazy. The only person she could think of was his mother. She drove to Joan's house that afternoon. The atmosphere was pleasant until Dina uttered the name Aliyah. The mood instantly shifted. Joan stiffened, her smile vanishing as she stated flatly that the issue was between Dina and Marcus. Dina begged her, tears welling in her eyes, explaining that she had found the journals and needed to know the truth. Was Aliyah really paranoid as Marcus claimed? Joan looked away, and after a long silence, she sighed with heavy resignation. She admitted their relationship had been toxic, that Marcus hadn't always been faithful, and that his behavior had made Aliyah's condition worse. It was confirmation. Dina wasn't crazy. Joan offered nothing more. As Dina was leaving, feeling emptier than before, Joan called out to her. She told Dina that she had tried to tell Aliyah to leave him quietly, but that Aliyah had been stubborn. She paused, then added that Aliyah had told her she had her own plan. When Dina asked what kind of plan, Joan just shook her head as if she'd said too much and told her to be careful. Dina drove home with those words echoing in her mind. She had her own plan. Those weren't the words of someone giving up. They were the words of someone getting ready to fight. This new energy surged through her. It wasn't just about pain and betrayal anymore. It was a mystery. Back at the house, she ran to the attic and opened the chest again, searching meticulously this time. In the back cover of the final journal, she found a hidden flap. Taped inside was a small folded piece of paper. On it was a name and a phone number, written in that same elegant script. Sarah, sister. Her heart stopped. A sister? In all their time together, Marcus had never once mentioned that Aaliyah had a sister. He had erased her from existence, just as he was now trying to erase Dina's sanity. She stared at the paper. The fear was still there, but it was now mixed with a new, powerful feeling, determination. This was bigger than her husband's lies. She had a lead. She pulled out her phone, her fingers decisively tapping in each digit. She had to know the truth, for herself, and for Aaliyah. Her thumb hovered over the call button for what felt like an eternity. Every worst-case scenario ran through her head. The number being disconnected, the woman hanging up, or worse, the woman being loyal to Marcus. She thought about Aaliyah, a woman she'd never met but now felt inextricably linked to. Taking a deep breath that did little to calm her hammering heart, she pressed the screen. It rang twice before a woman picked up, her voice sharp and cautious, immediately demanding to know who was asking. Dina explained, her own voice barely a whisper, that her name was Dina, and she was married to Aaliyah's husband, Marcus. The silence that followed was heavy and absolute. Dina could hear the faint sound of a television in the background before it was muted. The woman who confirmed she was Sarah spoke again, her voice now turned to ice. She made it clear she wanted nothing to do with him and warned Dina never to call again. In a moment of sheer desperation, Dina stopped her, her words tumbling out. She pleaded for her to just listen, telling her the one thing she knew would matter. She had found her sister's journals. The ice cracked. Another silence. This one filled with disbelief and a fragile, hesitant hope. An hour later, they were sitting across from each other in a generic, sterile coffee shop. Sarah was guarded, her arms crossed tightly, radiating an energy that dared Dina to say the wrong thing. For the first 10 minutes, Dina simply explained how she found the box, her voice low and steady. Then, she pushed one of the leather-bound journals across the table. Sarah stared at it as if it were a ghost. She slowly reached out, not touching it at first, just hovering her fingers over the embossed name. Then, she traced the familiar, elegant handwriting. Her tough exterior crumbled instantly, and a sob escaped her lips, a sound of grief held back for years. She told Dina everything. She described how Marcus had charmed her entire family at first, how he was the perfect, attentive boyfriend. Then came the slow, insidious process of isolation. She explained how Marcus had fed them a carefully crafted story about Aaliyah's growing instability, convincing them that their visits and calls were a trigger for her anxiety. He had twisted their love for Aaliyah into a weapon, making them believe they were helping her by staying away. Sarah confessed her profound, suffocating guilt, her voice thick with emotion as she admitted they had been so stupid to have believed him. He had slowly, systematically, severed her sister's ties with every single person who loved her. Listening to the story, Dina felt a chill run down her spine. It was the exact same playbook of isolation he was beginning to use on her. The confirmation was validating, but also bone-chilling. She leaned forward and lowered her voice, telling Sarah what Marcus's mother had said, that Aaliyah had been stubborn and that she had her own plan. Sarah's expression shifted. The raw grief was still there, but a flicker of something else ignited in her eyes, a flash of fire, of fierce pride. A small, sad smile touched her lips. She confirmed it was true. She explained that everyone thought Aaliyah had given up, that she had just faded away into her depression, but she hadn't. She had been getting ready to fight. Dina, confused, brought up how hopeless the journals sounded. Sarah explained that was because her sister had been smart. Aaliyah knew that a normal divorce wouldn't work with a master manipulator like Marcus. He would have weaponized her documented mental health struggles against her, painting himself as the poor, long-suffering husband to a crazy wife. He would have been the victim, and everyone would have pitied him. Aaliyah had seen it happen to other women and refused to let it happen to her. So, she had decided to go after the one thing he truly loved, the only thing he had ever valued more than himself, his reputation, his public image. Sarah revealed that Aaliyah's plan was to gather undeniable, irrefutable proof of his cruelty and destroy him with it, not in a courtroom where he could charm a judge, but in the court of public opinion. She had been preparing to burn his entire life to the ground. Dina was speechless. The image of the fragile, broken woman from the journals replaced by that of a calculated warrior. When Dina asked where the proof was, Sarah's eyes hardened with purpose. She told Dina that the journals were just an emotional outlet. The real evidence was somewhere else. The drive to the anonymous, sprawling storage unit facility was silent and tense. Sarah explained that she had kept paying the bill after her sister's death, driven by an intuition that she couldn't let it go. Inside the cold concrete unit, which smelled of dust and forgotten things, was a single large plastic storage bin. Aaliyah's second box, her war chest. On top was a laptop and a hard drive with a piece of masking tape on it, labeled M, Insurance Policy. They booted it up to find a meticulously organized archive of horror. It was a digital map of his secret life, hundreds of photos, screenshots of explicit text conversations, and financial records detailing his betrayals. Beneath that was a small digital audio recorder. Sarah explained that Marcus had gaslit Aaliyah so badly she started recording their fights just to prove to herself that she was in losing her mind. Dina's hand was shaking as she pressed play. Marcus's voice filled the small, cold unit, flat and cruel. She heard him telling Aaliyah that she was pathetic, that she was worthless, that if she ever left him, he would make sure no one ever looked at her again without feeling pity. Dina slammed the stop button, a wave of nausea washing over her. The final item was the most chilling, a binder filled with detailed notes on all of Marcus I.'s most important business partners, his bosses, and the board members of the charities he worked with. It wasn't just a list. It was a strategic analysis, detailing who was most influential and who valued integrity the most. It was a target list. This was an arsenal. Dina realized Aaliyah had been a soldier preparing for battle. The overwhelming question hung in the air. Did a woman this prepared, this determined, sound like someone who would simply give up? Holding the small recorder, Dina felt the weight of Aaliyah's legacy in her hands. She was no longer just a victim in her own story. She had been handed a mission. For the next 2 days, Sarah's kitchen table became a makeshift war room, littered with coffee cups and printouts. They worked late into the night, fueled by a grim, shared purpose. They sifted through the hard drive, cross-referencing dates, names, and locations. It was a gut-wrenching process, but with every piece of evidence they cataloged, their resolve hardened. They were no longer just two grieving women. They were investigators building a case, piece by damning piece. The key came from the binder. Tucked inside a sleeve was a clipping from the local business journal announcing the city's annual philanthropy gala. Marcus was a finalist for their prestigious Businessman of the Year award. Sarah explained the significance. It wasn't just an award. It was his holy grail, his ticket into the city's inner circle of power and influence. The nomination itself praised him for his unwavering integrity and commitment to the community, an irony so dark it made Dina's stomach turn. The gala was in 1 week. That was it. That was his stage. And, they decided, it would be his execution. The target was locked. Dina knew she had to see him one more time. She arranged to meet at the same cafe, a deliberate choice to invert the power dynamic of their last encounter there. She arrived first, calm and centered. When Marcus walked in, he was the picture of arrogance and annoyance, asking what she wanted now. She didn't waste time. She told him that she knew everything, not what he thought she knew, but that she knew about Aaliyah's plan. For the first time, she saw a flicker of genuine fear in his eyes, a crack in his narcissistic armor, before it was quickly sealed over. She calmly laid out her ultimatum. He had 1 week to withdraw his name from the award, citing personal reasons. He was also to agree to an uncontested divorce with an equitable division of assets. If he did that, she explained, Aaliyah's legacy would be buried with her. He asked what would happen if he refused. She explained, her voice even and precise, that the entire award committee, All of the Gala's diamond-level sponsors and a few of her new media contacts would receive a very detailed summary of his true character. She mentioned a specific audio file, the one where he screamed that he owned Aaliyah, and watched the color drain from his face. She told him the summary would come complete with audio and visual aids. The fear vanished, replaced by a defensive, ugly arrogance. He laughed, a short, sharp, disbelieving sound. He sneered that she didn't have the guts, that she would destroy herself in the process. He tried to get inside her head one last time, calling her a broken, vengeful woman who was just as pathetic as Aaliyah had been. He told her the game was over and that she had lost. Then he turned and walked out, absolutely confident that he had won. Dina sat there alone. His reaction was a final, damning confirmation. He was irredeemable. She realized she was at a crossroads. There was option A, the safe legal route. It would be a long, ugly battle where he would use his money and influence to control the narrative and paint her as a liar. Then there was option B, Aaliyah's route. It was dangerous and unpredictable. She could be sued. She could be publicly shamed. But it was the only way to guarantee that Aaliyah's truth would be heard, and the only way to attack the one thing he cared about. She thought of the cold contempt in his voice on the recordings. She thought of the calculated cruelty in Aaliyah's journals. She realized that playing by his rules was a losing game. The only way to win was to break the game itself. This was bigger than her divorce. It was about ensuring the monster was exposed so he could never do this to another woman again. Her hands were steady as she picked up her phone. But she didn't call her lawyer. She called Sarah. She told her it was time. It was time to finish what her sister had started. The hotel room could have been anywhere in the world. It was impersonal, sterile, and completely silent, smelling faintly of industrial cleaner and stale air. The only light came from the cool glow of her laptop and the flickering, muted colors of the television. Tonight was the night of the gala. She had found a live stream of the red carpet arrivals and was watching the city's elite parade by in a display of performative opulence and counterfeit glamour. It was another world, one built on surfaces and appearances. It was Marcus's world. And then, there he was. He looked impossibly handsome in his tuxedo, a vision of tailored success. He was confident, charming, and moved through the crowd with an easy grace, shaking hands, laughing for the cameras, the very embodiment of philanthropy and power. Looking at him, no one could ever imagine the monster hiding behind that $1,000,000 smile. He was a perfect illusion, meticulously crafted and fiercely protected. But tonight, that illusion was going to shatter. She looked away from the TV and back at her laptop. The email was drafted. Everything was in its place, a digital arsenal aimed at the heart of his empire. 2. The recipient list held over 50 email addresses. The entire awards committee, the CEOs of the diamond-level corporate sponsors, and the top 3 investigative journalists in the city that Sarah had found, reporters known for taking down powerful men. Subject: The Truth About Businessman of the Year. Nominee: Marcus Miller. Attachments: 5 files. Journal, excerpts, Aaliyah Miller.pdf, photo recreation, comparison.zip, financial records, undisclosed.xlsx, audio, final argument.mp3, a letter from his wife.pdf. The last file was the letter she had written. It was short, concise, and devoid of emotion. It simply verified who she was, stated the facts of Marcus's abuse and infidelity, and provided a clear context for the irrefutable evidence that followed. She rested her finger on the mouse, feeling the slow, steady beat of her own pulse in her chest. This was it, the point of no return. She thought about Aaliyah, not as a ghost in the attic, but as a soldier whose battle she was about to finish. She thought about the risks, the lawsuits, the public shame that might be directed at her. She thought about the moral line she was about to cross. This wasn't a clean, legal victory. It was a messy, public execution. Was it justice, or was it just revenge? In the end, she realized that for a man like Marcus, who existed only in the perception of others, maybe they were the same thing. Her final thought was not of Aaliyah, or even of herself, but of the next woman he would charm, control, and try to break. This act wasn't just about the past. It was about protecting the future. She glanced back at the TV screen. The ceremony was starting. Marcus was being led to his seat at the head table, the man of the hour. He waved to the crowd, soaking in the spotlight, bathing in their adoration. Enough. Her finger pressed down. One single click. The sound was tiny, almost inaudible, but in the crushing silence of the hotel room, it echoed like a gunshot. On the screen, a small, sterile notification popped up. Your message has been sent. She didn't feel joy. She didn't feel triumphant. She just felt a vast, hollow emptiness, as if she had just set down a weight she had been carrying for so long, she forgot what it felt like to be without it. The fight had given her purpose, a terrifying clarity, and now it was over. She slowly closed the laptop, cutting off the light from the screen. She stood and walked to the window, looking down at the indifferent city lights below. A million lives, a million stories, all playing out in the darkness. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. But they don't tell you that after you serve it, you don't know if it will leave you with the warmth of justice or just the cold of the void. She didn't know what would happen next. She didn't know what Marcus would do when the first phone buzzed in that ballroom, or how the world would react when the story broke. She didn't know if she had just started a war or if she had finally ended one. But for the first time in a long, long time, standing there in the anonymous dark, she felt like she was in control.